Hi everybody, Wayne Davies here from Spectrum Economics, and I'm still on market structure. So where have we got to so far? So I did an introduction to market structure, and then I covered off on perfect competition, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, and the most recent video was monopoly. So that takes us down now to our final two videos. Getting exciting, hey? And this one is on monopsony. So this one is not so much talked about in your courses and your textbooks and stuff like that, but it's still relatively important. And for me, I think it's a very good lead into oligopsony, which is actually going to be quite relevant to our STEAM guys. So, so stay tuned for that. So this is going to be fairly sort of theoretical sort of, what do you want to call it, presentation today anyway. So, this is probably more for an economist audience. If you're not an economist, I'm not saying you should, tune out and run away. You can still hang around. And also you have to remember as well, I still have those written posts in the description here of the video and on my Steam page. So that'd be great for you guys to, go in there and read up, just in case you didn't quite get what I said. And also sometimes when you say things in video, it doesn't always come out quite as intended as well. So you can clarify what's in the written description as well as, can clarify in the comments if anything you have any questions. So this, like I said, can be a little tricky sometimes explaining the more technical stuff in a video, the more theoretical stuff, but I'm going to give it a go here today anyway. I had another look through my post myself, just trying to refresh some of my thoughts. It's not something that is, covered on a lot of detail normally, so let's see how it goes anyway. Alright, so let's start off. So what is a monopsony? So I covered off a monopoly, so this is now kind of almost like the opposite to a monopoly. So monopoly, we had the one seller and many buyers, well normally many buyers. In this case, we have the one buyer and many sellers. So does this actually exist in the real world? In a way it kind of does, not in the way you'd normally think about it though. Like for example, the government could be the sole buyer of something in particular, like that could be the military, it could be the sole buyer of a particular type of weapons within a country. So that would be a monopsony. But monopsonies are more in terms of the labour market. And that is, again, that's looking again at government typically employing people within a particular area or people within a particular group. For example, you could have a specialist skill that not many employees are after, and you may have just one employer that is interested in that skill type. So it's quite interesting how that works. You can see here in the picture, monopsonies, like monopolies control price and quantity. Monopsonies do the same as well. So that is now the buyer controlling the price and quantity instead of the seller. And whenever you have anyone controlling price and quantity, they control it within their favor. So you get a situation where you have a town and most of that employment comes from, let's say, a multinational company. Multinational company. And they are, in fact, employing almost everybody. So in order to get a job, you need to work for this company. And because they are the main employer, then they control what you get and the hours you get and all that sort of thing. So you can see here, some people are not too happy about it. It's a CEO, 6,000 an hour, and regular worker just 15. So we tend to see that quite a bit in some of our third world countries where we have multinational companies setting up operation there, and they have very, very, very high unemployment. They just don't have jobs. So a multinational company comes in there and then they provide these jobs, but they have control over in terms of what they're going to be paying their workers. So okay, so let's look at this in terms of our graphs. We love our graphs, us economists. So we got a graph here, somewhat similar to what I've been showing you with the other market structures. We have our downward sloping demand, we have our upward sloping supply and marginal cost. So as you remember, we had marginal cost equal to marginal revenue for the monopoly. So what we have here now is we have marginal cost now equals to demand. And that would actually set your quantity. So that quantity tends to be a little bit less than your optimal, or should we call it your allocated efficient quantity, which is where your supply equals demand. So effectively you will have your multinational company, for example, coming in and not employing as many workers as you would hope. And at the same time though, they're not charging the high price, like you'd see in a monopoly, you'd have high price. They go with the opposite, they'd have a low price. And that low price you'd see on the graph goes all the way down to where the supply is. Because you have to remember, at a lower supply you have less people willing to work, but and that fits in nicely with what they're looking for. They're not looking to hire an awful lot of people, they're looking to hire just a few people, cheap labor, at a low price. So in other words, what you get is you get a much lower wage for the workers and you get a much lower quantity. So still sort of, compounds that effect of unemployment and also low wages. So it's not great, but there are things that can be done. All right, so again, I think this is further emphasizing my point. We got here as some slaves here in the it's a little bit of exaggeration anyway, in terms of, keep working, keep going. This is because the monopoly controls your price and your wages. So it all sounds like that's pretty bad, doesn't it? Is it such a bad thing? I think there's plus and minuses. I generally look at it and I see a monopsony, I think it's bad because you don't have that competition amongst buyers. I think it's a lot better if you have many buyers coming in, and then effectively that brings control back, well, it takes control away, should I say, from the buyers. And it's like my arguments for monopoly I don't think is good either. And again, you can have a monopoly / monopsony as well. So overall, I'm going to say that it's not particularly good. There'll be people that argue, though. You have multinational companies, they come into countries, and they offer employment. And there's almost, zero employment opportunities. So you are creating employment by doing that. It's not great opportunities, but there are some opportunities there. That could be seen as a short-run gain. I see it as a negative in the long run, though, because I think it stifles entrepreneurship in a sense that, people are now going to be working, getting the bare minimum. Instead, they could be, creating stuff, starting their own businesses. So there's several ways of looking at it. So in the short run, it may be okay. In the long run, I think you're sort of perpetuating poverty in a lot of these third world countries. All right, so what am I on to now? Okay, so this sort of emphasizes what else can happen. So generally you'd have a situation where people are trying to get a job and you have an employer. So what happens if there's very, very high unemployment? People will be willing to accept a lower wage, and that effectively is going to lower your marginal cost. And if you lower your marginal cost, that will lower wages, but that may actually increase the number of people that are working for that company. So you have a situation where you'll be lowering unemployment, but you're further lowering wages. And that's going to depend on the country in terms of how bad that unemployment situation is. I think an example is Indonesia. I'm not sure if that's still the case there. We have many multinational companies there, and there was very, very high unemployment, and the people that did get jobs were working 14, 15, 16-hour days at very, very low wages. And getting people to work very, very long hours as being part of their contract is a way of also maintaining unemployment as well. Instead of employing 2 people for 8 hours, you employ 1 person for 16 hours. So you have 1 person out of work and 1 person working, and you're constantly keeping the wages low because there's competition of people that constantly want to get jobs. And, when you get more and more desperate, you're willing to work for lower wages simply just to survive. So that's basically what I'm showing you here with this diagram. Oh, we got some more here. What else can we do? Oh, we can have minimum wages. That was my next thing. Minimum wages is interesting. Some people like it, some people don't. Minimum wages will protect the workers from this sort of, monopsony situation. When you have a monopsony, it can just keep pushing your wages right down to the bare minimum. So you have minimum wages, but it's a balancing act as well, because if the minimum wages are too high, then effectively that could be scaring away these employment opportunities. So these companies that are here offering jobs may now leave because that it's now becoming more expensive to hire workers. So I can see sort of a positive and a negative in regards to having minimum wages. A lot of countries have that. It's interesting. I haven't done any analysis to see how that's sort of been working out by implementing minimum wages, but it would increase the wages, but it would also lower employment as well, and especially drastically increase unemployment if these multinational companies are put off by these minimum wages. All right, so come to the end of this presentation. You probably noticed my camera's set up a little differently today. I thought I'd try something different. I've raised it a little bit, got it on a slight angle. Let's see how that works out. I'll look at it in terms of editing, see if I'm going to do any more videos with that. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So what are the key points to get from monopsony? You have the one buyer, and normally you have many, many sellers. You can get that in government industries such as military, but I think we look at it in terms of employment and the sole employer of a particular skilled service or a particular group within a particular area. Monopsony, I do not find it an ideal structure, to be honest with you. I feel that it's potentially a lot of exploitation that can take place through that, whether it's government exploiting workers or even multinational companies exploiting workers. We often see that in the case of teachers are often paid very, very low, and that's because you have governments effectively are paying them money, aren't they? But they are one of the few employers, though there may be some private schools in there as well, but it's a difficult one there, isn't it? And generally, monopsony results in lower wages, so I don't particularly like it. And also, I think it stifles entrepreneurship as well, especially in some of the third world countries. So for me, it's a bit of a thumbs down, but this is, I think, important to understand. And a lot of these key concepts I'm explaining today, I'll not be explaining in my next video. So that's going to be moving a little bit away from the theory, but most of today's theory is actually very relevant to my next video, which is going to be oligopsony, which is very, very similar to monopsony, just that you have several buyers instead of just the one buyer. But and this is going to apply to Steam, so I'm not going to go too much into theory on that, but I'm going to talk about it in the context of Steam and how it works that way. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. I'll probably include a link to this video in my next video, so you can come back and look at the theory behind that, because I'm not going to talk too much about theory in my oligopsony video. I also have several other videos as well that I haven't been working on. I haven't done too many recently, but if you go through a lot on some economic concepts and stuff like that, and I have my Steemit posts. So if you're watching me on D Live, I think it's most likely, or even DTube, you have direct access to Steemit. If you're watching me on YouTube, which is I think I'm using more as like a backup video center for myself now, there'll be links in the description. Anyway, thank you for watching, and yep, remember to follow, upvote, resteam.